city. The proverb before we welcome the guest?
Yes, we're still in the country of the Pharaohs. An onion shared with a friend tastes like roast lamb.
An onion shared with a friend tastes like roast lamb.
Let's make it vegan. An onion shared with a friend tastes like roast onion. It's now completely vegan.
Or like Mahindi choma.
Or nduma choma.
Muhogo.
Boil.
Yeah.
Yes.
Carol Musyoka is a corporate governance provocateur. Carol, good morning.
Good morning. Morning, Eric.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation.
Thank you.
I know you listen to the show.
I watch the show.
You watch the show?
Avidly.
Now here you are. You're being watched by everybody.
Eric, how come you and I never watch this show?
From the cloud.
This show that people keep watching. Do you ever watch it?
No, hardly ever, man.
We must
I never get the time.
We must start watching this
Between
show.
6 and 10, I'm usually busy.
Yes, working.
So I'm not able to really watch the show. Carol, how are you?
I'm good.
What do you
for
do?
having
Who
me.
is Carol Musyoka? I mean, yeah. Huh?
I do a lot of things, Eric.
Right.
But my day job is getting conversations around how boards work, getting boards to be more efficient, to be more effective. I sit on boards, I work with boards, and essentially provoke, particularly my bugbear recently, at least over the last 2-3 years, has been how we're getting small to medium enterprises to start corporatizing, to start thinking about how they'll be sustainable businesses, to start thinking about how do you there's this constant problem that owners, founders start, which is you start a business and then you envisage that your children are going to join the business. And you're starting to find that children don't want to be in the business. They want to do their own thing. Some of them want to become influencers or bungee jumpers or, just the soft life.
Anything else?
Just the soft life.
Of my money.
Yes. Well, it's not your money. It's our money. It's a family, right? So we put an inordinate amount of pressure on our children to join the business, and maybe they're not interested in it, rather than thinking, well, how else can I corporatize this? How can I bring in other, professionals to run the business? Because I'm going to get old, I'm going to get tired, but I still want to reap the dividends of all the work that I've put into this business, yeah? So the beauty of now starting to bring in an external group of people who can help you think through this, how your business will grow, how your business will be sustainable, how the business will be in control, it's a good way to start thinking about the business beyond you.
Okay.
And a classic case is Nakumatt.
Yeah.
I think that's something that we're all familiar with. And the question I always ask is, would it have been different? Would the outcome have been different if a company like Nakumatt had had a good, strong, board of independent directors?
What is this thing about boards? So apart from boards where the president appoints people to these boards of parastatals, which is just a job, right? Where you meet 79 times a month and you get a sitting allowance and you look at all these other things about, so this board is the National Irrigation Board. And
They are supposed to be
so
in
we
charge
meet
of
today
irrigation.
so that we can discuss about irrigation.
Yes.
And we meet tomorrow to discuss
About irrigation.
irrigation. Let's meet again next week on Monday to discuss
Irrigation.
What's the importance of a board?
Oversight.
Oversight. Of
Oversight.
what?
It's three things. So a board provides oversight, it provides insights, and it provides foresight. So they're not just talking about irrigation, What are they there to look at? This is an organization that has got very many stakeholders. So first is what it was mandated to do, all right? Let's say to ensure that there's irrigation in semi-arid and semi-arid lands. But, it also has employees. It's also paying taxes, for example. It also has suppliers. It also has people that it's providing services to. All these are stakeholders, and all these stakeholders, there should be somebody who's minding the minders. So it's management who are running the business, and then there should be a layer on top of that management providing oversight as to how effectively management is executing its mandate. And are they taking care of all these stakeholders? So the Western way of doing business is very shareholder driven. You're looking at capital. You're looking at ensuring that the shareholders get paid a dividend. But the shareholders are not the only stakeholders. Yes, they put their capital into this business, but they're employing people. You'll have to look after their employers. The people supplying, goods and services to this company. Are we paying them, and are we paying them on time? So there's a lot of oversight that you're providing. There's insights into how the management is being done on a day-to-day basis.
Right.
And then there's foresight. What's coming around the corner? What might happen that we're not seeing? What's the strategy? Will you still be in existence in 5, 10, 15 years? What could wipe you off the floor of the earth?
You know, the two things that people think about, there's the employees of an organization. So there's a company, there are people who work there, report to work every day, they work, they get paid. And then there are the owners of the company, the shareholders. They put in money, capital, whatever, they own the business, they reap dividends from this. And then there's this board thing.
The board thing is umaing you, Eric.
Yeah.
It's really umaing
What
you.
is this board thing? And especially when you say they're independent directors, what does that mean? It means they're not shareholders, they're not employees.
Yes.
They're just people
They're just
sitting
directors.
there as directors. What is this about them? Why are they important? What's the importance of this institution?
All right. So like I said, they're there to provide oversight, to provide accountability. So banks, I'll use a very common banking term called Keyman risk, okay?
Yeah.
So let's look at a company. So CT decides he's going to start a company that's going to be publishing books about Proverbs. Right? And all of a sudden it takes off. Everybody and their brother wants to buy these books about Proverbs.
Yeah.
And CT is making money hand over fist. But to produce those books, he's got to buy paper, he's got to buy a printing press, he's got to get writers, he's got to get researchers. Is he paying them? That's a very simple question. Yeah. Is he paying all these suppliers that are coming out? So for example, there's ways you can be able to finance your business. You can either get money out of your pocket, you can borrow from the bank, or you can actually borrow from your suppliers, meaning you've got to pay salaries. You just simply don't pay your suppliers. And you don't pay them in month 1, you don't pay them in month 2, you don't pay them in month 3, because you're using what you're supposed to be paying them. You're making sales, and those sales, you're using it to, let's say, pay your employees and not pay the suppliers for what it is. So who's minding that? Who's asking CT the hard questions? Like CT, we can see here, you've not paid people for over 6 months. What's going on? There's a huge risk that's occurring in this business. And so that's what your directors do. So it's two kind of directors. There's your executive directors. Those are those who are in management. So let's say, a finance director who sits on the board is an executive director. A managing director is an executive director. In fact, I got asked this question last week. What's the difference between a managing director and a CEO? A CEO is a chief executive officer. Yeah,
he's the MD.
Capo di capi.
He's the MD's boss.
No, the chief executive officer is the chief officer. All the staff, your management are officers of the company. So he's a chief executive officer. If he sits on the board of directors, then he or she becomes the managing director. So that's why you'll find some CEOs who are not managing directors, and that's fairly commonplace, where you get a board.
Please repeat this.
Yeah.
Okay. So CEO is chief
executive
officer. So he's the chief of all the executives.
Yes.
Of all the officers.
Of all the officers.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And MD?
The managing director is a director who sits on the board but has been empowered to manage the company. So he is also the chief executive officer. So you'll see them going chief executive officer and managing director.
So what happens in a case where you have a CEO on the one hand and there's an MD?
No, that's quite unlikely. That's a problem. That's highly unlikely. So
you can't have an MD and a CEO.
No, it's your managing director who's a head, who's been given the power by the board, who's been delegated the power to manage the institution. So he's the managing director and chief executive officer. So you can have a managing director who's CEO, but you cannot have a CEO who's necessarily a managing director, because he or she does not sit on the board. Yeah.
No, it's not sinking. So this sitting on the board, what is it about sitting on the board that doesn't CEO you or doesn't manage director you? What is it?
Okay. So you set up a company, right? You go to the company's registry and you say, I'm the shareholder and I'm setting up the company, and these will be the directors. It will be CT, it will be Eric, it will be Carol, will be the directors. Then we'll say, CT will take on the executive role, the actual day-to-day management. So you will be the managing director. Yeah, because a director doesn't have to take a role in day-to-day management, running of the business. And a director may not also be a shareholder. So I can set up a company and I don't necessarily want to be a director. I don't want to appear on the list of directors, because directors have a fiduciary responsibility that is born of the Companies Act. The Companies Act says these are the roles and the responsibilities of directors. And and there are some shareholders who are like, serious make, I can't do that. I don't want to have that legal responsibility.
I'm just a shareholder. I'll just get a dividend.
Yep.
At the end of the day, let these other people, if the thing goes south, they deal with the law.
Yeah.
Why is it important for the Companies Act to actually put in that fiduciary responsibility on the board?
Because a company, which is a legal, it's a legal entity, which is separate from the shareholders, is taking money. Remember, you're providing a service.
Yeah.
So there's a whole range of stakeholders. You're in a stakeholder universe, and somebody has to be responsible to those stakeholders. Yeah. So that's why when you see a company, in the press, it's taken bad debt. I mean, it's taken money of customers and everything. Who draws the hellfire? It's the directors of the company, because you were there when these decisions were being made to undertake the product and or service that this company is giving.
So, do I hear to be saying that a company, therefore, is treated like a person in law?
Yes, it's a legal separate entity, yes.
It's corporate
But what do you
citizen.
mean by a person?
Well, I'm thinking more of liability. And I'm thinking people sue a company.
Yes.
It's an entity.
Yes.
But that entity has people who run it.
Yes.
And this is where now this discussion about the fiduciary thingamajig that you mentioned. Okay? So, if the company has that responsibility, as do the directors or shareholders or whoever they are, then that's why I asked, is the company being treated as a person?
Yes, so the company is a separate legal and distinct entity that can sue and be sued, as can the directors of that company. And as well as the senior officers. So in fact, one of the things when I'm training directors, when they come for director training, is I always ask, when you go and you agree to sit on a board, one of the first questions you should always ask is, does that board or does that company have DNO cover, which is director and officer cover, so that when the company is sued, because we'll sue the company, remember we're suing CT Proverbs and Company.
Yep.
We will sue CT Proverbs and Company, and we'll also sue
The directors.
and we'll also sue the
staff.
the CEO and let's say the senior executives who made decisions around it. I mean, you've seen what's happening at the Capital Markets Authority when they're coming down quite hard on issues of securities,
Yep.
and the company has gone down. Yeah, I mean, history is replete with these. We don't need to say them. So it's not only are the directors being held to account, but you've seen CFO is being held to account in
Yep.
some cases. The head of legal is being held to account. The head of risk. So in that case, your direct and insurance cover is supposed to check in if you're being sued, because you can't, it's you have to pay the lawyers, and that's a lot of money. So your DNO cover is supposed to come in to check in and pay for that legal service. However, if you're being sued because of negligence, abject negligence in your duty, you are derelict in your duty, then the DNO cover
Doesn't work.
doesn't work.
Let me ask this DNO cover. What does DNO again stand for?
Direct and officer insurance.
Now, can public institutions also have this cover?
Well, they should. They should ideally, right? Because if you're suing the public institution for mismanagement, for whatever it is, you're going to sue the institution as well as the directors of that institution.
I'm thinking of the county government.
Oh, you're about to open a can of worms, aren't you?
Oh, well, the can exists and it's begging to be opened. So, I mean,
And the worms inside.
And the worms are inside. I didn't put the worms in there. So, who am I? Okay. Why I asked the question is because if I hear you correctly, the things that we're discussing, the things that you're telling us about, seem to gear itself towards creating a greater environment in which accountability can actually be experienced. Now, this thing that you're talking about, these things rather you're talking about, are they part of what we tend to be told are good governance when it comes to running organizations? Or is this a completely different set of things from good governance.
So unfortunately, we've taken a slant to what happens if things go wrong. Let's talk about when things go right.
Now, when things go wrong, it's actually, in this country, it's a very good place to start everything.
It's relatable.
Oh, no, it's very relatable.
I know, but it's what sells, right?
It doesn't
It's
rain
what
for
sells.
4 years. It's a bad thing. So you need to ask. So when it doesn't rain now for 6 years, what do you do?
Yeah.
Please go on.
No, but there's also the good side of governance, CT. So you've got companies that are growing from strength to strength. And if you look around, the other day, I think earlier this year, you had somebody from KRA who was talking about the different levels of taxation and what they call small businesses, medium businesses. So
That was Yeager.
I was blown away. He's talking about small businesses start from 750 million in their books, what they call as a small taxpayer, and then the rest are very small. 750 million shillings turnover.
Turnover in a year, that's madness.
That's massive.
Eric and I were blown over. We actually thought we were running a big business. We realized that our business was microscopic.
It's small. It's relative, right?
Yes.
Now, if that is small for KRA, now how many of these companies are primarily run by single, it's your founder?
Yep.
All right. Now, by the time you're turning over 750 million, how many people are supplying to this business? How many employees do you have? Who's minding that? Who's helping this business owner think through this? And I'll go back to what I started. I said that this is what we call now Keyman risk. Because if that founder dies, what happens? And that's what I'm talking about, business that then collapse.
Yeah.
There's a potential because, let's say, his children are not in the business or haven't been seasoned enough to be able to run this business. He hasn't put in an effective, we call them founder syndrome, so you haven't put in an effective assistant, somebody who is imagining the death of, it was treasonous to imagine the death of the president. So you don't put in enough competition or somebody who can actually take over effectively because, you see that you're not about to die. So the question we should be asking is, when you've got companies of this size, what kind of governance do they have to ensure that this company will outlive the founder? And that's what good governance is. It's bringing in independent people who are experts in finance, people who are experts in sales and marketing, people who are experts in risk, who will help you de-risk the business or become alive to what the risks are in the business, and to put into plans and structures that will ensure this business is sustainable if in the event that you pass.
In the work that you do you find that when you conduct training, that the issues that you deal with have to do either with ignorance or resistance to new knowledge, or is it just an adherence to a culture that people prefer as opposed to the information that is available and yet they are not inclined towards taking?
Those are many, many questions, many variables.
There were 3.
So remember, the person who brings himself to class has already said, you know what, I don't know. And the dangerous person is one who doesn't know what they don't know. The one that you want to work with is the one who says, you know what, now I know what I don't know, so now take me to a place where I become competent. I don't know, CT, if you've ever heard of the quadrant where you talk about this unconscious incompetence, which then becomes conscious incompetence, which is then supposed to transform into conscious competence, and then totally conscious unconscious competence.
There's something called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where somebody who doesn't know because of their ignorance think they really know, and the sort of people who are very quick to give lots of advice, and yet those who really know are more reticent because they understand the pitfalls involved. Yes, so the Dunning-Kruger effect explains what you just said.
Okay, I'd never heard of Dunning-Kruger.
Dunning, D-U-N-N-I-N-G.
There you go.
Kruger, yes.
The Kruger.
The Kruger, like the Krugerrand. Yes.
Yeah. So you want that person, so the person who brings themselves to class to learn says, you know what, I now know what I don't know. Help me learn. How do I create good governance? Now, very often you tend to find the ones that I've seen in class are the young people who are just starting out business or who've been in business for 5-6 years or well educated. In many cases, it's actually the second generation. Mzee is getting old. Mzee wants us to come in and take over the business. We want to come and learn. What is it that we don't know? How can we get better governance? We want to bring in independence. I've dealt with some families where they're like, you know what? We want to bring in external directors, but Mzee is not very comfortable with this concept. It's like these are people who are going to come, steal our secrets, and go and set up a competitive business.
Yep.
So no, we don't want. Or we've come. Mzee doesn't want to bring in externals. We are not necessarily wanting to be in this business, but we have to be here because we're the ones who have to take over this. So there's very many variables to
How
people
do you
who come
talk to
into
Mzee
class.
to get him to understand the benefits of all this? Because there's that, unless Mzee is one of these people who can't be talked to, and I'm saying there's really nobody who can't be talked to.
But Mzee has run this company since, for the last 45 years.
Absolutely.
Alone, without external. In fact, there's a time when I tried to partner with so-and-so. That guy came and tried to steal this company from me. I had to fight to get him out, to kick him out. Me, partner with somebody else or bring somebody to understand my business.
And the one or two who will agree will bring in a friend.
Yes.
And the friend is not necessarily the expert they need.
No, or the person who will question. Who will question some of the
So there will be
initiatives
yes
that they're
people.
trying. Absolutely. And sometimes you can see this business, so they want to acquire another line of business, or they want to go into a completely different line of business. And this is Mzee's bugbear. He's like, let's do this. And the family's like, but he's brought his friend. No, Bwana director here. What do you think? And Bwana director's like, maybe that's not so bad. Yeah, so he's a yes person.
You give the example.
Let's take a break.
Are we going for a break?
Let's take a break.
So.
Okay. It's 9:30. Carol Musyoka is a corporate governance provocateur. She wants all of us to just think, put the box on the side and think and ask ourselves, so what is it that we need to do? So you're a founder of a business, you've been running your business, and you're thinking, the business is starting to grow. All right, fine. But are you actually thinking properly about the corporate governance of that business? Do you need to get external support so that you can then have proper oversight of your business? You, shareholder, you, director, get other people who are also helping you think along that route. This conversation will continue shortly.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Titi Muga and Carol Musyoka, who's our guest host today.
I cannot take the place of Do. Those shoes are too big to fill.
Don't worry. Tia says, this is an enlightening discussion. We're talking about boards and the importance of thinking about board from small enterprises. So we see boards at big listed companies, banks all the time, putting up adverts. So we announce the resignation of so-and-so as a director. We announce the appointment of so-and-so as a director. What's the importance of having a board? As you know, I started a company 4 years ago. I've been running the company. It's doing relatively well. I'm okay. I'm running it. I usually call Carol. We sit and have some chai and I tell her what my tribulations are with staff, with clients, with payment, with management, with care, with this and the other. We are moving. At what point should I start thinking about putting together a board for a company?
That's a good question, Eric. And, there's always a question of should you do it at the beginning or should you do it as you ramp up? And I think, once you're at about 10 years of doing business, then maybe you should be thinking about bringing now external voices, because you can create an echo chamber with yourself. You're having a conversation with yourself. You can't, you don't know where the corners are. You've got blinkers because, in fact, to use the English statement, you miss the forest for the trees. Yeah, You're so busy in the business of just doing that you're not seeing that perhaps the cheese has moved, the market has moved, consumer tastes are changing, there's regulation coming down, you might be regulated out of business. Look at somebody who set up a plastic paper manufacturing plant 7 years ago and was going to ramp up business, and then you get regulation that we're now removing plastic from the government, it's an environmental hazard. What do you do? Could you see that coming? Now, if you'd had a board member who'd been a bit seasoned, they'd have told you, the way we're seeing, other companies, other countries going, we're going to have this potential for a ban. So we need to start thinking about what else can we use these facilities for, these skills that we have, this distribution network that we have. How else can we leverage off of it? So the short answer to your question is, once you've moved through that first 5 years of being a startup, you're becoming fairly stable. You're thinking of bringing in external investors, new investors, so you want somebody who will help you walk through what it will take to bring in other investors into the table who might be able to protect you. I mean, you've had situations where private equity funds have come into your business and then you're removed.
Stripped it bare, kicked you out, sold the company.
I wouldn't call it. You're going really far. You guys have a real doomsday scenario to every situation.
Let's just work with your
yes, exactly.
with your very bright scenario.
Absolutely.
So they come in, they kick you out.
No, they've not kicked you out. So
All
they've
right.
put in money. They've taken on a big amount of shareholding. And, before you can say lickety split, they're like, you're not actually the CEO who can
This
be able to
business
grow
does not need you as a CEO.
That's right. But you can also move off and become, a director and allow another CEO to come in and grow the company to the heights that it becomes. Or you can appoint somebody to represent you on the board because, chances of you being a bit of a stick in the mud if you're sitting as a director and there's a new CEO, the chances of you getting along with that CEO, you'll be like, that's not how things are done around here, So you should get off cooling period, appoint somebody. You can appoint a family member or a trusted friend or somebody who's, a professional to come and represent you as a director.
But
And you bear the dividends.
Looking at how our political culture influences our business culture in this country, the very thing that you're talking about, this very gospel that you're preaching, runs contrary completely to the way many people do business. Because a lot of our businesses fall into the category of what we call crony capitalism. Okay? So money isn't made because someone has produced a great deal of value, and that value has been appreciated by people who have partaken of it so that the business has grown. Because I know so and so, and I've done this, and I've pushed this here, and I've done this here, and I've done this here, and I've done this here. Now, what you are suggesting, which makes perfect sense to me, requires accountability. And a lot of the businesses that I see being conducted in this country cannot stand the cold stare of the sort of scrutiny that this brings about. So how do you then package that message so that this scrutiny and this accountability is seen as a benefit, so that irrespective of what your culture and your way of doing things has been, this now presents something that will benefit you better than the way you have been going about your business?
Well, first, CD, I have to push back a little. I don't believe that a lot of the businesses that have grown in this country have grown because of crony capitalism. I think the people who've gone out, done really good work, understood their consumers, understood their markets, and grown businesses primarily through pure sales. I'm
actually in agreement with you.
Now, so let's I want to debunk that myth that you have to know people in order to be able to do business successfully. Yes, there's stakeholder management. Yes, there's stakeholder management, and you have to. And we call these stakeholders. Hence, why you're bringing in somebody on your board who will help you perhaps navigate
with the networks.
Yes, navigate these stakeholders. All right. All right.
I like the way you're agreeing with me. Go on.
No, I'm not agreeing with I'm debunking a motion.
No, this debunking, which is in essence agreing, is good. Please continue debunking. Keep debunking.
So who are we bringing around the table? So you just asked a question. You said, are they going to be comfortable being asked questions? Yeah. Now, the question is, what kind of business are you doing? I always say, I do a lot of board evaluations, for example, and I tell some of my clients that it tends to be functional boards are the ones that come to get evaluated. Dysfunctional boards don't want to be evaluated because they know, it's dead in the water. And same thing, if you're running a good business, running a clean business, you've got no problem getting people around the room to come and help you navigate this business area that you're in and help you grow your business. Now, if you're running a shady business, and we know there's lots of billionaires out there who are billionaires but you cannot point to any product or service that they're producing, of course you're not going to get, and they'll create all these shadow companies. They're not going to bring in a board. No one wants to be scrutinized like that. But if you're doing a legitimate business and you want to grow and you're thinking about expanding, maybe even expanding to different counties.
And you put a name and a brand behind the business.
Absolutely. And you're paying your taxes and you're paying your taxes regularly. You shouldn't have any problem getting people around the room, bringing in Eric to come and sit. Maybe you're starting a media company. Why don't you bring Eric Latif? He's done this. He knows what the pitfalls are. He knows the networks in the industry. So why not bring in his expertise to come and help you?
Which brings in that next question. So what do you look for when you want to constitute a board?
Excellent. Depends on what the industry is, and therefore first you do a skills assessment. So let's go back to our example of CT Proverbs. CT's Proverbs, all right? So he wants to establish a publishing company doing Proverbs. So perhaps he's going to look for somebody else who has done publishing, right? Who's retired perhaps from publishing, because if it's
By
an
being a
active
publisher, this is someone who runs a printing press, or somebody who's been an editor in a publishing company. What are you looking?
We'll determine
Anything.
Yeah, we'll determine
So
which are
bring
the
in Barack Muluka into yours.
which are the specific. And you don't want to bring in somebody who's a competitor.
Okay.
So perhaps you can also think about doing it from somebody who's in a different geography, or somebody who's retired.
That's why you brought in
Okay.
the element of retirement. Huh?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So you bring in a publisher. Now, any company is producing financials. You're running numbers. Yeah, the numbers never lie. So you do need what I always say, the first person you always need is somebody who's a qualified accountant. And your qualified accountant is the one who will essentially chair your audit committee, audit and finance committee, who will interrogate the numbers as and when they're being produced, who will ensure that you've got a budget that you're adhering to, who will ensure that your business is in control. Because if you're not in control, then everything goes south. So you want to have an auditor. Then perhaps you need stakeholder management, because maybe you want to get into publishing for schools, for example. You want to get into the whole education system. So somebody who knows how to navigate this whole publishing books in that space. So somebody who's familiar with maybe the ministry or how things are, or that whole curriculum development thing. So somebody who will do that stakeholder management. So that's what you're thinking. What are the skills that you need? Minimum about 5 people.
Okay.
Yeah, your finance, your industry knowledge, your stakeholder management.
HR.
If you have many employees, if you have, if you're operating 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 employees, then maybe you do want a HR expert, especially if there's a potential for unionization, or you're going to have, you're foreseeing that you're going to have layoffs in the future. You may want to bring in that expertise. Some of these expertises can be outsourced. Yeah, you can bring in a HR consultant, and also get lots of questions of, should you bring in a lawyer? So again, if you are in a business that is very litigious, where there's lots of lawsuits coming in, then it may be useful to have that expertise on your board. But if you can outsource that need and just bring in a lawyer to advise, that can also work.
By outsourcing, what do you mean? Like a board can outsource a certain competence?
No, yeah.
Is it for like a yearly contract, or how does a board outsource? And this is not now management actually outsourcing a consultant.
No, it won't be the board outsourcing. It will be management outsourcing.
Okay.
That's expertise, and you have that expert come in and talk to the board about this particular bugbear. That is. So, for example, if it's a HR issue, you can say we'll have the HR consultant come in and report to the HR committee how we're resolving this particular issue.
It's interesting you should say that, because I'm thinking about organizations. And when Eric talked about outsourcing, how they bring in auditors, because those are outsourced. I mean, you may have your internal auditor, but when you want to do your books, you want to get maybe some reputable auditing firm that has some international acclaim, not just your cousin and his 2 best friends who studied accountancy. But this culture, I'm back to that culture which you debunked. And by the way, I like your definition of debunking. When people debunk and then agree with me, I encourage you to keep debunking. The culture that we have of business and the way people believe business should be conducted. Are you saying that you have seen an increase in people who want to actually work in an environment where accountability is at the heart of what they are doing? Or is it still a teeth-pulling exercise?
To be honest, it's less about accountability and more about getting more voices in the room and being able to create a sustainable business for the long term. Accountability is just but one element.
Byproduct.
It's a byproduct of it, yeah. Because remember, at the end of the day, you're actually accountable to your shareholders, yeah. And if the shareholder is perhaps yourself as the founder, but your family, never underestimate the role of the spouse and the children, because this company is what is being used to pay school fees, is what is being used to pay for lifestyle. So that is coming through. Well, the minute they can't pay for school fees and pay for lifestyle, you're going to be accountable to those stakeholders, yeah. But thinking about how this business is going to move forward, what's coming around the corner. What new technologies can we bring into this business? You do need to have different people who can be able to come and challenge you on that. And, I've been working with medium-sized enterprises in terms of creating what we call advisory boards. And so you asked me at the beginning, what's a board? So there's two kinds of boards. There's the advisory board where when I go to the company's registry, I won't find your name. You're just coming here to be an advisor, as it were. So you don't have a legal responsibility. You don't have a fiduciary responsibility under the Companies Act because you're not registered as a director. Then there's a statutory board, meaning it is set up under the Companies Act. You've created your company and you've got directors. Those directors have got legal responsibilities. So one way to ease into this whole board manenos, as we call it, is to set up an advisory board.
So start off with an advisory board.
You start off with an advisory board.
Okay.
Yeah. And then if you're getting comfortable with it, you then move now into a statutory board. And that's when accountability checks in, because now they can ask you tough questions because their name, they've signed they've put their John Hancock on
Their
those
name
documents.
is on the line.
Absolutely.
So when you're approached to join a board, what should you think of? What is it that would motivate you to say, yes, I'd like to sit on a board of a certain company?
A lot of people, Eric, want to give back. There are lots of mid-level executives, senior-level executives who are working, who are in the day-to-day grind, and who want to give back because I've learned so much, right? I want to be able to go and help another company that may not be able to afford me as a manager, but I can be able to help and provide some level of advice. So there's a lot of people who are willing to come in and sit on a board. But the first thing you need to do is ask, is this business now? Am I joining as an advisory board? In which case I've got no legal responsibility here and I can come in and I don't mind lending my name to you. But if I'm joining you as a statutory board member, then now my name is on the hook. And there's it's a little corner of the Income Tax Act that says that directors are liable for the yes.
Even tax.
Yes, even tax. So you need to know if you
Tax
are going to join
obligations
in.
also fall onto you as a director.
Yes, the taxman can come after you.
Okay.
For the tax obligations of that entity in which you're sitting as a statutory director. So you've got to be very careful. Don't just join your friend's company. You need to do a little bit of research. Are they doing business clean? Or are they into the whole crony capital?
So what should you ask for? Should you ask for papers? Should you say, okay, you've approached me, you'd like me to join your board. This is what I expect. Audited accounts for the last 7 years.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd like to see. Are you doing a legit business? Audited accounts, tax compliance certificate, maybe even certificate of good conduct.
Certificate of good conduct of the other directors.
No, I'm kidding. No, but definitely you want to know, is this business compliant? Especially if you're joining as a statutory director. Because if that company gets into problems, they will bring in all the directors to hook. Now, you don't want to start saying of me, I just joined last year. So me, these things of 10 years ago,
I don't know.
I'm not part of this.
Are you actually enjoined in it as soon as you join?
Well, now you start getting into that argument of me, I just joined. The Kenyan, I just joined last year.
So I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's important that we raise these conversations about, proper corporate governance, because here we are, all of us, we all are trying to get into a business this, business the other. You start a business.
Actually, Eric, we're trying to make money.
Yeah, we're trying to make money.
Yes. This business is the vehicle. Yes.
The end product is the money.
Yes.
And then at some point you realize that this thing that is bringing money is actually growing. And you even say, I'd like now to quit my day job so that this thing can now become my day job. And you're going to grow it. And you're spending a lot more time in it. And that's why I asked you, so at what point do you start having that thought of bringing these external voices into it? Is it at the founder stage where you're also thinking, just people to be brainstorming around and seeking their advice? Or is it at that point where you said, you've gone through the ups and downs of the first 3 years, first 4, first 5, now you can bring in a board?
Yeah, you don't want to do it at the beginning because founders of businesses are huge risk takers. And so you don't want somebody that's sort of holding you back. Yeah, holding you back. You want to take the risks. You want to burn. If you crash and burn, you crash and burn alone. But then by the time you're getting to year 5, your business is fairly stable, and it won't hurt to bring in now.
And you've learned your lessons.
You've learned and they continue to be learned as and when you go along. So that would be a good time now to maybe set up the advisory board, particularly because remember, you're at the CEO, they say it's lonely at the top. You're not going to be asking your staff members, hey, I've reached the end of my tether. I've run out of ideas. I don't know what to do. Because you've got to remain this, your chief.
The vision bearer.
Yeah, the vision bearer.
I'm listening to what Carol is saying, and I'm thinking of business that is not necessarily commercial. Okay? And yet you have a leadership structure. But should not the voices and the input of these people who work with you, because remember, yes, you brought them in, but whatever changes and whatever is being done, they're in touch with it more than you are, actually.
They who?
These people you have employed. Okay? So I'm taking it off from where you mentioned. You said, look, you can't go to these people. And I'm saying, the question I'm asking is, why can't you? Why can't you have a structure where these partakers, they're involved in this process with you? Why should what they do and how it is they function not contribute to this thing that...
Like encourage them to think and come up with ideas.
Yes.
Forward ideas.
Yes.
I'll give you a good example. Yes, you do. Because remember, at the end of the day, they're the ones who are executed, they're the ones who are on the ground.
Yes.
But look at what happened during COVID. All right? You're the owner of a hotel.
Yep.
You have to decide, am I going to shut down this hotel because I have a payroll to pay? Month 1, month 2, month 3. COVID, we've shut down. Am I going to go to them and say, hey, now you guys, what do we do? Or am I going to have to make a very painful decision that I have to lay off staff? That's not a decision you're going to be making. So it's not a collaborative discussion with your staff.
Public participation.
They were not consulted, right?
Public participation.
Yeah.
I mean, you can achieve... What you are saying is right. Here we're going to be talking at cross purposes. But it is a culture where they work for you, you've employed them, yes, but their voices count. So
Absolutely.
even when you're going to lay them off, a conversation is had.
Yes, the conversation is being had that first you're going to say, okay, how can we rescue this situation, all right? Perhaps we can start having half salary, half payroll salary,
Yes.
right?
But you take the lead in saying, these are the things that I want to do.
Yeah, but it's a decision that you're going to make singularly first.
Yes.
Yes, that's what I'm talking
Yes.
about. And it's a heavy decision to make. And that's why sometimes having a board or somebody that you can be able to go and say, okay,
I need to lay off.
I need to lay off. Is this the right thing? And the board say, and if you had your HR expert, they'll say, yes, you can. Maybe you can go the half salary first and then the total salary at the end. Or let's rejig these contracts. Some of them are permanent and pensionable.
Right.
Let's remove all of this and now make them into contract employers, short-term contracts. But you need to have those people who you're bouncing your ideas off of. Because it's a heavy, giving people that letter, it's a wrap. Go home. It weighs heavily. It's a big
Final
decision.
question, Carol. From observation again, you talked about family businesses and transitioning into second generation, third generation. Nywele ngumu, hardly. Asian families, success stories. Why?
Let's go back to Nywele ngumu. Is it called ask people?
Ask Nywele ngumu people.
So the question, we don't what?
Hardly do we transition our businesses to the second and
Next
third generation.
All right.
Yeah.
The business dies with the founder.
So why must we transition the business to the next generation? When we say transition, do we mean transition meaning they are in active management, or they start to reap the dividends of what we've sown? A good example, the Coca-Cola company started in 1886. That's when the formula was founded. This guy called Asa Candler. Candler is the one who bought the formula from the one who created it. And then the company was bought by the trust company of Georgia. They're the ones who bought the $15 million from Asa Candler. They paid the Candler family $15 million cash and $10 million in preference stock.
Yes.
All right. What is preference stock? Meaning that you will get paid a 7% interest year on year. So now you become shareholders. All right. And now the family starts to reap the dividends. So that's the whole thing, is how do we create this company as a family so that we can bring in other people, external people as management, as board, and we just sit and get the dividends.
We sit back and we eat the money.
Yes.
Do you make money out of these things that you're telling us?
We try. So we're running a program next week, Monday and Tuesday, and more details can be found on my website, carolmusyoka.com, and we'll tell you about how to run
carolmusyoka.com.
carolmusyoka.com. We're running a founder writers program, and we'll tell them more about how to set up these structures.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're getting there. Carol, thank you very much for
Thank
joining
you
us.
very much for
and
having
keep
me.
coming, right?
Yes.
So then we can, like Andrew is challenging, he's saying, watch these things you're telling us, Imperial Bank, Chase Bank, Uchumi, Nakumat, all these hard boards.
Who was on their boards?
Yep.
That's the thing. Carol Musyoka is a corporate governance provocateur. Thank you very much for tuning in to Kenya's biggest conversation.